Before we move on to the head, I'm going to create a controller on the ground for positioning the character, and I'm going to link this center of mass and the 2 feet to that. So I'm going to go into shapes and top view and gone. I'm going to go with 3 so it's kind of pointing which way. Okay, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to click on enable and viewport. I'm going to change the color to probably a solid red, or I could go with a scheme where it's sort of a master controller where the darker it is or the grayer, add a custom. And I'm going to grab this object, I'm going to align it to the root, but not in the Z. I could go by orientation, but we're not. Before I move on, I'm going to use reset X form, and then go collapse, modifier stack result, collapse select, just playing it safe. I'll go with 4 sides, set the interpolation, 6, we can go 3, probably doesn't matter. Okay, let's make it a little bigger. It's an editable spline right now. I'm going to go sub-spline mode, grab it, scale it. Make it bigger. If you scaled in object mode by accident, you'll want to go into reset X form, reset selected, collapse, and collapse modifier stack result. I'll call this CTRL master. So as I was saying, let's grab the center of mass controller here and the 2 foot controllers to this master controller. So now we can do this. I should probably want these to follow in position as well to the position of the center of mass. So I could use a position constraint for those. So grabbing the neck controller, the hip controller, and such, instead of using select and link, I want to use animation constraint, position constraint, so they're always going to be relative to center of mass for where they're positioned. And I'll have to grab each one, go into the motion panel, and under the position option, under position constraint, click on keep initial offset. Just make sure to do that for each one. And so now, we'll move this around, they shall follow, except for the head. And then click on keep initial offset. Remember to alt right click and freeze transform for your master controller as well. Just so we don't accidentally scale or move any of these, let's just click on each controller on our list and go over to hierarchy, link info, and lock the XYZ motion and the XYZ scale. If you have something that you're using as a look at target, you don't want to lock the movement of it. In that case, just lock the scale. You'll definitely want to lock the scale for everything here, but we don't want to lock the movement for the feet, but we will lock the scale. In fact, I'm going to go on a scale locking rampage here. I believe these guys are actually just exposed transform nodes. If it so turns out that you need to scale the character for whatever reason, if you're just using bones, the standard procedure would be to double click or just click on the root bone and control click on the geometry and scale those, and if you're scaling the root, all the children will scale with it. These are just orientation based controllers. We don't have to have the movement, so we can lock that, we can lock the scale. Okay, so let's go to geometry mode. Unfreeze all, grab this one, Alt X, and hit F4, and we'll begin work on the head rig now. I noticed that one important feature I forgot to add to this character for good facial expressions is a set of eyebrows. So let's just hide the hair geometry for now, and I think I'll right click, isolate selection, and I'll just put this down here. Make sure to make a backup copy of any texture before you start painting on it, because if you don't, you can end up writing blank over top of it by accident. First of all, let's just save this file and go Tools, Viewport Canvas. Now we could click Pick Map. I have an older version. It seems to act oddly. Or if I use Pick Map, I'm just going to click on this. So we got Kid Face 1 here. I'm going to copy this, go into Art Backup, rename this one O1. Paste this one in here. Just making sure I got a backup copy here. Oh, and while I'm in there, I should see what size I was using. 1024. I'm going to do this as a new one, Kid Face 2, just to make sure I don't overwrite that. 1024. Okay, first I'm going to click on Paint, tell it what I want to paint on. And I got the Layers dialog open over here, so I'm going to go load bitmap into current, and it wrote over top of our Kid Face 1. Let's go into Art Backup, copy this one into here, and open it. Front view, first of all, let's bring this radius down. You can use a tablet and use the pressure sensitivity to adjust the thickness of your brush if you got the right brush settings set up. I'm just going to kind of gradually paint it in with the mouse. Let's pick a color. And if we wanted to, we could stylize it and make it so that the eyebrows are just kind of these sort of partial circle things. We could make big thick eyebrows that make the expressions a lot more obvious. Oh yes, I remember now. Use the spacebar to get straight lines. So you click once, and again. I might have wanted this a little bit higher, but considering where the hair is, yeah, actually, should have started this more here and kind of went this way, but it'll work because I'll just use smudge. And smudge would be ideal for kind of creating slightly bushy eyebrows. And I'd like to make these eyebrows a little more subtle. So we're going to use burn on them, just a little bit along the bottom, and then blur. And then back to smudge. And that way I can kind of make it look like they're indeed eyebrows, made of actual hair. Even though this is a cartoon character, this extra detail is absolutely unnecessary, but because I feel like it, I guess. I'm going to use control click to grab this background color. Actually, before I do that, let's go to flat. There. Now for sure we're going to grab the correct background color because the lighting isn't factored in. Let's bring this opacity way down, and oh, I'm on smudge still. Let's go to paint. Boost the hardness a bit, I guess. Boost the opacity, there we go. Let's boost the opacity even more. I just want to make the eyebrows a little more subtle, because they're a little bit too dominating, I think, right now for this character. Maybe I'll use blur. So once you're semi-satisfied with that, you can unclick the paint, go back to perspective, smooth highlights mode. Now it's not going to look as smooth. You can get it to look a little smoother if you go into customize preferences, configure driver, and just pick a higher resolutions. And it won't update unless you go into wherever it's getting that map and hitting reload. And then everything will look smoother. If you have a newer version of 3D Studio Max, the functionality might be a bit different. It might be more automatic. It might be a higher resolution automatically. Okay, so let's exit isolation mode, see what we got. So now we can make the character a little more expressive by adjusting the eyebrows. And what we can do is we can add surface bones to move different parts of the eyebrow around. If I want to move the left part up and down, I can do that. Same with the right part. Depends on how complex you want the eyebrow rig to be. I would probably, for this game character, I might just use one here and kind of blend between influences for here and here, between the two surface objects that I'll use to control the skin mesh to manipulate the eyebrows. Okay, let's exit this. To control the eyebrows, normally I'd create something that kind of sticks to the surface that I can move around. We could use a shape for that, probably to use a helper for that, possibly a box point like we were using down below. Oops, where did I put that? Let's go in the list, helpers, and select it. Okay, so apparently it's down here. Let's change the size, say 5, and align it to this. Let's go back to helper selection, drag it up, drag it out. Actually, I'd probably prefer to use a shape for this. That way I can always just use shapes and I don't have to change selection types over here. I mean, the other way you could get around that is to use the manage layers and have all your controllers, including helper controllers, within one layer, and then just have everything, all the other layers frozen. And that way you're only selecting the controllers. So you can actually use this or a shape as a bone to manipulate the skin mesh vertices, add some influence of those vertices to this as though it was a bone. I'm not entirely sure if all the exports or export versions will actually, like when it's in the skin mesh as a bone, it should accept it as a bone. I'm not entirely sure they will. So just to be safe, I'm going to use an actual bone instead, and I'm just going to have it so that it can rotate up and down to modify the expression over here. In the animation rollout, I'm just going to create some bones and go left view. You want to keep in mind how far you want it to go up and down, and that'll determine how long you want to make that bone. Actually, if you don't want it to deviate this way much, you want to use a longer bone. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to position it so that it starts way back here. And I'll only rotate a tiny amount. I'm going to go to the top view, perspective. So this nub will almost act like, well, we won't be moving the nub around itself. We'll be angling this bone. So kind of like what we did with the eyes. And these are going straight down, no angle change. So it's safe for me to clone these, and I'm going to create 2 other clones. I'm going to grab these 2 and move them over to the other side. First, let's see what position I want this at. So you might be able to tell I'm just trying to avoid using mirror because sometimes that can get a little tricky. Preferably, I just want to move this horizontally. Okay, so let's copy this X value and I'm just going to hit T so I can grab this one in the front and paste it into here in the negative. And then I'm going to go T, grab this one, and paste this one in the negative. So now they're basically like they're mirrored. Then I can grab this one and pull them back. Not too far though, because I want to be able to grab the tip for animation. This one and this one, pull them back a bit. Just going to quickly color these. I'm going to go ahead and label these so I know what they are. So I'll say bone left eyebrow inner. And I'm going to copy that, paste it, and change this to outer. Copy that, go to the outer one over here, paste it, and change this to right. Go to the inner one, paste it, change it to right inner. We could do the same for the nubs too, although by the time we're done everything, we'll probably end up deleting the nubs before we export the model. So that's up to you. Just so that we know what these nubs are though, I would recommend labeling them so we know whether we need them or not when we're checking through our list if we're going to use the select by name. Just a note though, if you do decide to use point helpers or shapes to modify the surface, they would all be parented to this upper jaw so that when the mouth opens, the head moves, everything follows with it. Problem with that though is the local or gimbal orientations won't be correct unless you control click on all of them. Now with the bones this isn't going to be a problem, but in that case you'd control click on all of them and use group and group them together as one entity. Grab that entity and then use select and link, and then you can link it, and then when you move it around, the local orientations or gimbal orientations of each one when you go to select it is going to be correct. So just something to keep in mind if you decide to try to do it that way. Okay, so I just hid the eyes and I made these transparent just for a second. I'm going to go to bone selection mode only, and I'm going to grab all of these, and I want them to follow this upper jaw. So I'm going to link them, grab the upper jaw as the parent. This way they should follow. Now that they're linked, it's safe to freeze their transforms. So I'm going to double click these. I'll just click all these. Control click them all, and alt right click, freeze transform. Yes. If you had done this with point helpers or shapes, you would have to link the group to here and then freeze the transform for the group. And you'd probably also want to grab all of your shapes and freeze the transforms for those too. Go in geometry select, grab this, and over here, let's click on add. Like I said, if we were using point helpers, we could go into the display helpers menu and add them from there. In this case, we're actually using bones again. Just to be safe, I'm always going to use bones here, just in case the exporter acts funny when you use other things. Okay, I don't really need the nubs, so I'm just going to grab these bones here and add them in. What we could do is use auto key and try each one of these up and down at different frames. So I'm just going to quickly pause the video and I'm going to go to the bones and I'm going to set keyframes for them animated slightly upwards, maybe 20 degrees, and then down, an amount that looks appropriate based on your character. For example, we could drag the time slider to 10, click auto key, grab the bone selection for the first eyebrow here, snap selected is turned on, and just rotate it up to some maximum value, or what you suspect might be a maximum value, and then maybe at another spot down to some minimum value. Actually, we could make this go even higher. I'll grab the next bone here, and let's say 25, maybe here, maybe 30, down here. And these ones I'm going to animate them, but I'm not going to do the paint weighting on this side. I'm just going to use the mirror, but I'm going to set the animation keys for them so that I can make sure that they're actually working at those angles. Something like that. So with auto key turned off, I'm going to go back in edit envelopes and go down, and I'm working on the right side here. So bone right eyebrow outer, we'll work on that one first. I'm going to hit F4 so I can see the mesh. If you're using shapes or points to control any of this, you may want to make the envelope capsules shown and reduce them to a very minimal size. In this case, I'm using bones. The default capsules for these are a reasonable size. I can click on the upper jaw here and move it around, and I can see that it's not influencing anything in a way that it shouldn't by default. So going back into geometry, grabbing the skin, the right eyebrow inner, show no envelopes, and we're going to deal with vertex weights in a different way here. Now let's go with the uncheck the paint blend weights, because we're not doing that right now, and click on paint weights. Click on this dot to open up the options. Going to reduce the brush size. 5 is still a bit big. I guess 3 should be okay. Maybe even want to go with 2. Strength at 100%. We're using the hard curve here. I'm just going to reduce this max strength to 0.7 at first. So anything I click on here is going to get a 70% influence right away. Could go with 100% influence. So this is to block in stuff that's going to be very strongly influenced by that bone. And we could subtract from that influence in just a moment to fine-tune the result. Alright, so this whole part of the eyebrow is fairly strongly influenced. Put a little bit of influence down here. I'll use the alt click after with the soft brush to kind of soften this up. And then this guy is going to influence a lot of this stuff too, so maybe I should have started off with a smaller percentage influence so I could just kind of gradually add these influences, but it depends on how you prefer to work. I'm going to go with this one that looks like an S, which is sort of the soft brush, and I'm just going to go 0.1 for max strength. And you can use alt to remove, so I'm using alt on these ones because they're a bit much, especially up here. These ones should be far less. Not that it really matters that much, because they're going to be hidden by the hair. Let's add a tiny bit of influence over here so we get a nice blend. So the mesh distorts kind of smoothly, no rigid edges. And I'm just alt-clicking these ones to bring them down a bit, because these are going to flow partly with the eyelid. We don't want too much influence from the eyebrow over this. In fact, we want very little. The only thing we really want over here is sort of a blue influence, because we just want that tiny bit influence so that it blends nicely. I'm gonna add a little bit of influence here. Down these ones a little bit, and we'll try animating it to see how it moves. And I believe we're influencing the wrong bone. We were influencing this one, so we must have selected the wrong one. Oh yeah, we selected inner instead of outer. I was trying to do this for the outer one. It might even be a good idea to disable animation keys for these other ones, so I'm just gonna change my animation here too so that I don't get messed up. All I'm doing here is shift copying the 0 keyframe to an appropriate frame for each one, sort of before and after the animation in question. So let's grab this one, and shift drag the 0 over to say here, and shift drag it to like right after. That way it kind of animates one at a time so they don't interfere with each other and I can see what each one's doing. One-click auto key, go back to geometry, go on skin, and let's fix this left eyebrow or right eyebrow inner because I painted the weights for the wrong one. So we're going to work on the inner first, I guess. Then we'll go back to the outer, which is what we're supposed to be doing. So with that selected, edit envelopes has to be turned on for any of this to work. Click on paint weights. I'm going to go to hard brush so that I can just alt click on this stuff. Let's go to the inner animation. Now some of this I actually may want to influence, but first I'm just going to zero this stuff out and sort of start again. Let's make sure we have backface cull vertices turned on so we don't accidentally paint something behind back here that we don't want to. This goes up to here. Let's do this in smaller increments, like 40% or something. This is way too much influence here, but it's just blocking it in to begin with. So 0.1, soft brush, that's alt right or alt left click and bring some of these down. Starting with these ones. And I'm going to click these and bring them up. Let's go over to the display settings for a moment and just make it so that we don't see the bones or the shapes. Reactivate edit envelopes and go back to paint weights. Let's make sure we got our right inner selected again. And so the challenge here is basically to smoothen it all out and sort of get a gradual lifting of the eyebrow that matches with the bone motion for that eyebrow. I'm going to let it influence the very edge of the eye shape just a bit to give it a little more expressiveness. I don't want to do any of the inner edge because it's got to conceal the eye, otherwise it could look really crazy. Let's go 0, 7 maybe. Influence looks appropriate. Let's move on to the next one. So I'm going to grab right eyebrow, outer. I'm going to start adding influence. I'm going to go with the hard version. I'll start blocking it in at 30%, I think. Maybe more. First, I have to get to an animated point here. It's going to make sense. Sometimes it's easier to start with the partial motion of the bone and then go to the most extreme after, once you've kind of got things blocked in so that it looks good at that initial angle. Using alt click again to reduce some of these influences. Let's go with soft brush here. Go with this one again. I'm gonna give this one a little more power over the other one than it currently has. So if you remember, all we really need to do now is mirror to the other side. Let's turn off paint weights for a moment. And we're gonna mirror the green side to the blue side. So the other side should move just the same sort of way. Since the animation is a little more extreme on the right side, and since we're looking at it at a slightly different angle, we can see some deformation that looks a little bit too crazy. So we can go to left eyebrow outer and tone it down a bit, and then copy mirror to the other side. I'm just going to change this to 1 centimeter so as to not accidentally see that there's some undesirable effects here. Left eyebrow outer, we want left eyebrow inner, and we want to alt click these. We don't want those influenced. Okay, let's see how that works. Looks good. Just going to check around the mesh, make sure there isn't anything influenced that shouldn't be. And turn off paint weights for a second. Go to mirror mode, and I'm going to mirror from the blue to the green. So when we combine motion of both bones at the same time, the eyebrow movements should look a little more natural than these extreme positions of each individual bone. Let's go create another controller shape for controlling the mouth. You can pick whatever shape you like. I'm going to just go with a rectangle. And I'm going to rotate it 90. So this one will control the upper part of the mouth, and we'll make another one that will control the bottom part. First, I'm just going to make sure they're the dimensions I want. Say 4x4 maybe. Maybe length 2. Okay, I'm going to change the color for it so it's easier to spot. And I'm going to use the align tool and align it to this upper jaw node, or any middle bone really. Orientation doesn't matter. So I'll just pull this one out here. And actually we're going to have an eye controller out in front, so you might want to put it somewhere where it's not going to be obscuring the eye controller. Maybe I'll just put it here for now. I'm going to shift drag down to make a copy. CTRL lower jaw. Change this one to CTRL upper jaw. Give this one a slightly brighter tint because it's higher up. Make this one darker. And temporarily hide these eyes and the hair, I suppose. I'm gonna grab this, go with X. Let's make it so we can't select this. Freeze. We could have aligned it to here. Do like before where we convert it to a editable spline, pick subspline, and then drag and grab around it. So you grab all of it and move it out to whatever position. So this way you'll see that if you click on Effect Pivot, you can see that the pivot is located over here. And so another way that you could do this, it's gonna align this depth-wise. Another way you can do this is if you created it, you positioned it here, you can just click Effect Pivot Only and align the pivot itself. So we'll align it to the lower jaw, X, Y, and Z. Position only. Actually, before we continue, what I recommend we do is create a helper, and I'm just going to use a cross point helper, and we're going to attach it to the very top of the spine here. So I'll just put it here, use this align tool, align it to spine 3, actually no, align it to neck. We want it to align in position and orientation. I'm going to bring down the size of it, and I'm just going to call it neck base helper. And so what we'll do is we'll constrain it. Actually, if we want, we can even just link it. So I'll just link this to the top of the spine. So now it should follow, if I grab this one, it should follow as a neck base to pivot from when I use this spine controller here. If you wanted, you could actually put this maybe sideways and behind the controller to control the spine if that seems to make more sense to you. Because you don't want to link this to this because you'll end up with a dependency loop, because this controls, both of these control these bones. So that wouldn't work. But what you could do, now I already put a freeze transform on this, so this might cause some sticky issues here, but what we could do is make it so that this is going to have a position and orientation relative to this guy here, neck base helper. So if that's desirable and you actually want this to actually follow that, we could do that. It might limit, it might actually make the animation a little more difficult, but that actually, depending on how you want to animate the character, it might actually make it easier. So if you want this to follow the head. You actually can't do that because that would again cause a dependency loop. So this is actually more like a neck controller really, if you think about it. And if we want these to follow the skull bone, I suppose we could link them directly to the skull bone. I'm not seeing that this point helper is going to really help me for what I want to do right now here, so I'm just going to delete this one. But I think what might be more useful is if I went up here and created a point helper in exactly the same sort of way. I'll align it to the nub of the skull. Position and orientation. And of course all these little helpers and gizmos and shapes and stuff, they're just for driving the bone solution. They're not going to be exported into the game engine, just in case you're wondering about that. So they're basically just for rigging tools for animating the character. Change the name of this and I'll call it helper head. And actually it would be better if we align this to the skull itself, position and orientation. Okay, and then we could use constraints and constrain it to the skull. I'm just going to link it, grab the selection tool here. Alright, so if I move this, or if I rotate this, it follows, which is good. And then what I'll do with these controllers here is I'm going to parent them to this guy. So they'll pivot around this point, but they'll inherit position, orientation, and so on and so forth from that. So let's link them to this here. It's going to check the pivot for these. Okay, it's right where it should be. Good. I didn't accidentally undo and lose the pivot positions. So these pivot where they should. And if I grab this auto key, maybe here the head's down, maybe here the head is up. So I should be able to move to any of these positions here. And these controls will follow now. And I can change the orientation and stuff. Okay, I'm going to turn off auto key, grab this controller here, delete these keys. And I think I'll do that also with the spine controller at the neck position. Alright, now that these are linked and I'm satisfied with their rotation around the position, I'm going to Alt right click and go freeze transform. Let's make sure to grab that point too. Alt right click, freeze transform. Okay, I'm just going to save as a new file in case I mess anything up. So there's a couple of ways we could make these control the jaw. Depending on what 3D software you're using, you may need to use a different technique. But what we could do is we could create a point helper and align the orientation and position to the upper jaw, and then make another type of point helper, maybe one that looks different, and do the same thing for the lower jaw. And then use orientation constraints to constrain to the helper, and then have the helper linked to this guy over here. So then when I rotate this around its pivot, which is placed here, the helper will inherit that change, and that will in effect alter the orientation of the upper jaw. The other thing we can do is use, like we did before, the keep initial offset. So I'm just going to grab the upper jaw and use an orientation constraint and pick the control upper jaw. So everything's going to be messed up initially because it has a different orientation for the pivot. Let's go over to the motion tab, go down to the orientation constraint under rotation and click keep initial offset, and that'll fix that problem. And then for lower jaw, we'll grab the bone for the lower jaw. Again, use animation constraint, orientation constraint, grab the lower jaw. And the reason this works is the pivot is here again. And make sure go down and click on keep initial offset. So I'm going to unfreeze all for a second, just so it doesn't look as freaky. Let's unhide the eyes and maybe the hair, just to see how this is going to look. So we'll grab these, transform to 0. So next, let's create some shapes to control the eyes. I'm going to hit F, make a circle, or you could use a square. I'm just going to use a 2-step interpolation, maybe 1 step. Don't really need that much. Okay, and I'm going to shift drag this to make a copy, and I'm going to name it CTRL right eye because it's opposite because we're looking at the character. Copy this, grab this one, and change this to left. And this guy here, I'm going to make it green so I know that's the other side. And I'm going to align it to this nub here, just the position. And this one I'm going to align it to this nub. I'm going to grab both of them and drag them back to here maybe. And we'll use those as look at targets. Now, I'm going to create a rectangle to hold these. So in shapes, rectangle, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and I'll align it to one of these guys. I'll put the X position at 0, so it's right in the middle, and let's make it wide enough to kind of contain these things. We'll kind of give it a reddish, grayish color to show that it's in the middle. Now, just to be on the safe side, anytime we create new shapes, it's a good idea to grab these and hit Reset Expform under Utilities, Reset Selected, and then go to Collapse, click on Multiple Objects, and yeah, collapse to multiple objects, modifier stack result, and click collapse selected. Okay, and then we'll grab both these eye controls here and link them to this main controller here. Let's make sure to remember to name this eyes, controller eyes. I suppose that works. And I'm going to link this to this little helper here. So it's going to hit Alt-X, Alt-X, grab this one, just freeze it for a second, and I'm going to grab this and link it to that helper. So now let's make sure that works right. When the head moves up and down, it should follow. That might not actually be a desirable behavior. You actually might want to just link it to your master controller instead, so that, yeah, actually that would be better. Let's not link that. We'll instead link this down to here. That way we can control the eyes quite independently, and they can focus on specific targets. Let's alt-right click on this and freeze transform. I'm just gonna go unfreeze all. So there's a couple different ways we could make these eyes look at these. One way is to go into IK Solver's HI Solver, click the nub here, and extend out the IK goal to align to the center of this, and then link the IK goal to this controller here. I think the easier way to do it actually is just to use a look at constraint and click on right eye control. And your orientation may look fine depending on how your texturing is, but it probably isn't. So just make sure to scroll down and click on Keep Initial Offset. And you can scale down the view line length if you want. I like to keep it so that it actually looks through the controller so I can see where he's looking. I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side. Animation, look at constraint. And make sure again to click Keep Initial Offset, and I'm just going to dial this back to about here. If you're not using Keep Initial Offset, you can also use this up node axis stuff over here. Let's just test this out. So I can move the individual eyes, which we probably won't do very often unless we want to make them cross-eyed. Now, one thing I would note when you're animating a character, if you move the eyes over, say to look at something to the left, when you're animating that character, this eye should actually stop at a certain point, and then you would grab this one and continue. And the reason for that is if you move all of this over to, like, say right here, for example, I mean, they should kind of stop at a certain point. So you might be looking at something that's completely to the left here, but you wouldn't actually want the eyes to actually point all the way to the left. So this guy here would probably look more natural if it was like something like this. And that's actually a tip that I got from another animator. I'd like it so that if I move this in, the eyes kind of go a little bit more cross-eyed. So I'm just going to grab this, it's at 9.5, I'm going to put it at 9, and I'm going to put this one at -9. Now that way, if I move this inward, eyes should look towards each other a little bit. So I might have to put this one at like 8. And this one at -8. So something really close to your face, your eyes are going to point inward a little bit so that they can focus on it. I'd say we could probably even go 7 and -7. So when I move this out, they should straighten. So most of the time you'd have your look at target way out here. If you move it in, the character goes a little bit cross-eyed. There. That way anytime the character is looking at something closer, it's going to look a little bit more natural. And you don't have to modify the orientation of each eye individually. With the controller for the eyes selected, go ahead and add a attribute holder in the modifiers onto your stack, and then go to animation, parameter editor. I'm just going to go 0 to 10 for the range. Maybe I'll go 0 to 20, give it a little more precision. Right align and add. And perhaps I'll edit that so that this fits a little bit better. I guess we could just say lid, because we know that the lid's going to refer to eyelid. Left top lid, and we'll create another one, left bot lid, which is left bottom lid. Same sort of thing, 0 to 20 should be good. Right top lid and right top lid. Instead of wiring these parameters, we might want to have multiple variables affecting bone movements. If we just use wiring parameters, we can't add, as far as I know, you can't add multiple wiring operations on the bones. One thing we can do instead, we'll have to click on the bone itself, starting with the top left eyelid. So I'm going to go into bone select only, and just click on this top left one, putting everything in X-ray mode here, and then I'll go back to bone select only, grab this one, and go to the motion tab, and then go to the assign controller, and I'm just going to pull this out a bit. I'm going to expand this rotation thing here, and the 0 Euler XYZ. And I do believe, if we go to gimbal, we can see that this rotates around the Z axis. So click on Z rotation, Bezier. Right click on this. Okay, so we'll click assign controller. If you already have a variable assigned, you can actually right click and go to properties, but this will be the first time we're doing it, so we'll have to click assign controller, and we're going to grab float expression, so we can make a float variable, or a set of float expressions I should say, and we want it to be scalar, and we'll call this one top eyelid, and click on create. Okay, and we're going to need to assign it to something so that it has a value. So something's going to create the value for this variable, and that's going to be from our attributes. So let's go into objects and look for our parameters. We need to get to the controller for the eyes, and that should be under the hierarchy for controller master. Go down to controller eyes. We're working with the left eye right now. Or no, wait, we're working with the right eye because it's the character's right eye. So go to controller right eye, or just controller eyes, and then we want to go to modified attribute holder, custom attributes, and we're working with the right top lid. So whatever value this is, it's going to be in top eyelid in this expression. So now we can say top eyelid, and we want to use degrees to radians, or rad to degrees. So we got a 20 degree setup initially. I'm going to click on evaluate, and later on we can right click on this and say properties, and then go into here, create another variable if we want another variable to affect this. And so when we move the controller up and down, for example, we could create a reaction to that, or an expression evaluation where the relative distance change or whatever would affect the eyelids so that they kind of follow if it's within a certain range, and that way you could get the eyelids to react automatically. If the eyes are pointing down, they'll kind of follow down a bit, just like they do in real life. But that's beyond the scope of this tutorial, so just thought I'd mention it so that you know what can be done. Okay, so I'm gonna grab on this. Oh yeah, I got it in bone select only. And I'm going to play with this right top lid here, and it really goes crazy. Oh, because I'm going radians to degrees. I want to go degrees to radians, and click evaluate. Okay, so we might want to go -20 to like +60 or something. So go to the parameter editor, currently selected, and then we'll just go edit this right top lid. We'll have to change all of them eventually. We'll say -20 to +60. Accept parameter changes, apply changes. Just gonna click on this, Alt X, Alt X. Okay, let's see how that works. So I can make the eyes go a little wider, and I can blink them down to about here. Click on edit again, right top lid. I'm gonna say 100, accept parameter changes and apply. Oh, it's only going down to 20 still. Okay, I see what's happening. We want the change to be the opposite. So I'm gonna say negative, or we could even put the minus in front of degrees to radians. And click evaluate. Okay, that way when I drag up, the eyelid closes. Seems kind of backwards, but yeah, I suppose you could just change the parameter too and not put the negative in there. Just depends on your preferences. Then we'll click on the next bone, this one here. Go into motion, rotation, 0 Euler, Z rotation, and click on assign controller, float expression. I'll call this bottom lid. Just copy this. Create, assign to controller. And this time we'll want to go down to right bottom lid. We want to go degrees to radians. And I'll put a minus in front because I seem to be doing it the other way. Okay, let's see what this looks like. It goes that way. We'll change this parameter set. So right now it goes 0 to 20. We might want to go like -100 to 20 or something like that. Parameter editor, edit, right bottom lid. I'm going to go -20 to +100 and then just flip the value sign around again. Accept, apply. Let's change this expression and then click evaluate. Okay, let's see what happens this time. 100 might be a bit much. You want to limit it, but that should be fine. And just apply the same principles to the other eyelids. So again, selecting the bone for left top eyelid, going to Z rotation, assign controller, float expression, top eyelid, and then create, assign to controller, left top lid, degrees to radians. Just to make it the same as the other one, we'll go minus evaluate. And then again, we may want to modify that parameter again. So edit, make sure you select the controller first. Okay, now we can click edit. Oh wait, no we can't. There, now we can. Parameter editor, okay there. Left top, I believe it's -20 to +100, accept apply. Okay, and the rotation's the other way on this side. So, in here we can take away this minus sign. Click evaluate. And then bone mode, grab the bottom eye bone, motion tab, Z rotation, assign controller, assign float expression, bot eyelid, and create, assign to controller, left bot, dag to add. This one actually might be minus because the rotations are the opposite of the other one. So, and again, I'll just grab on this left bottom. First, let's see what that does. Okay, that's actually desirable the way it's doing it. So let's just change the span of this. So we go -20, say positive 100, even though that might be a bit much. Accept, apply, and let's check it out. So if we want to blink, we can do this sort of thing, or wink in this case. Okay, looks good. Excellent. Just going to save it. Let's start by making a shape to control the eyebrows. I'm just going to make a little rectangle, and I'll shift drag it to the right here. So now we got 2 of them. And perhaps I'll name them first. This will be left outer brow. If that's the outer, then that should be on that side. This will be left inner brow. And I'm just going to align this, quick align to this one. Grab this, quick align to this one. Using control, grab both of these. I'm going to select shapes only. I'll have to click on the center of each one. And I'll just drag these forward far enough so that the hair shouldn't go over top of them. I'll just align that one to this one, but only in depth. Let's grab these 2, mirror, copy. Let's see what the position of this one is. Sometimes to see the actual coordinates, you have to actually drag it and move it a bit. Control Z, and this is at 6.952. We could align it at the X value, this one on this side, and likewise for the other one. In fact, I'm kind of curious if that'll give me the same value, so I'm just going to go like this. Oops, I need to select all here. Align to that nub, X and Z. And I'll grab this one here. Wait, what was that? This one, yeah, 652, 952, yeah, it did it. Exactly mirrored perfectly. Okay, so I'll align this one to this nub, just X and Z, and that one's 13455. This one should be the same. Okay, so that worked. So what we'll do is we'll make it so that when we move these around, these bones will point towards them. Same thing that we did with the eye bone. Just playing it safe here. Let's grab these controllers and go into the tools, hit reset X form, reset selected, and then we'll just go to collapse, multiple objects, modifier stack result actually, and collapse selected. And you don't see the X form in here, so you know that worked. And I'll just grab all of these. If we wanted, we could create another additional sort of master controller for the eyebrow. So when we move that one single one up and down, it'll move the whole eyebrow. But I don't think it should be too hard to just hold click on both of them, grab them, and move them around that way too. Let's make sure these are named right. Left inner brow, left outer brow, and this one should be right inner brow, and this one should be right outer brow. And as far as having these look at these, we could use an IK solver, or we could use a look at constraint. I think I'll change the colors of these two so that it reflects which side of the character it is. I'll make these controllers, well, they're already green, kind of. Let's make them a little more green though. And we'll make these ones more of a blue color, or purplish blue. Control click all these, just got the shapes selected. Alt right click, freeze transform. And so like I said, we could use a constraint, look at constraint. What I'm going to do though, is I'm going to use an HI solver. Let's grab this bone here. Animation, IK solver, HI solver, and click on the nub for eyebrow right outer. So we have the IK goal selected right now. While we have it selected, let's use the align tool and align it with this right outer brow. Okay, so what we can do now is link this IK solver. So make sure you got the solver itself selected. It should be selected right now. So just check that. And, well, actually, it doesn't have to be selected because you can click on this to make sure that you're selecting that first, and then link it to this. And it should say the name of it, right outer brow. And just to test it, you should always test it after you do this, grab that and move it around and see if the eyebrow follows. And it does, so hit Control Z. And we'll do the same thing for the other eyebrow controls, the exact same technique. And then after that, we're going to grab all these IK goals and use Alt right click freeze transform on those. just a quick review, just grab the bone, this one, and it should say bone right eyebrow inner, and then we want to go animation HI solver and make sure it says nub eyebrow right inner, click. Now you have that goal selected, use a line, and you don't want hair, you want right inner brow to be shown, click on it. Okay, and now select and link, make sure you're selecting the right thing here, which is this, and we want to link it to this. Now let's make sure that it linked to the correct thing, and it did not. Let's do it like this. Link to this. There we go. So now when I move this around, it should follow. Okay, and just repeat the same procedure for the other side. Just quickly control click all of these IK goals, alt right click, freeze transform. And if you want, you can name those IK goals too, so they're easy to identify from your list. And you don't have to do the same as me, but I named mine IK left out brow, IK left in brow, and the same sort of thing for the right side. And by control clicking both these controls, obviously, you can move the entire eyebrow around. And if you want the hair to move with it, what you can do is go into the hair object, and I'm not going to suggest doing it for this kind of hair because this is really sticking out quite a ways, but if you wanted to, you could. I'll just give you a quick tour of how you do that. You could either use a skin wrap, or you could just add vertex weight influence to a tiny bit of vertex weight influence to the hair here, so when the eyebrows move around, the hair will actually kind of move out of the way a little bit, but that's up to you. Hiding the body and the head and the eyes of the character, I'm going to grab this head controller shape. I'll just hit F3 so I can see the bones under it, and I think what I'll do is I'll create a parameter that I can use to make the hair sort of bounce. So in the Modify tab, or panel, I'm going to go Attribute Holder, and we'll go to Animation and Parameter Editor. I think I'll just go with Spinner again. Could use a slider, but Spinner gives me exact numbers, so I kind of like that. And we're going to call this, I'll just say hair up down. Maybe we could make a sway forward, sway left, sway right. I'll say -10 to +10. A lot of this animation too, especially for cinematics, we can use the flex modifier. We'll get to that later. Okay, we'll add that, hair up down. I'll add another one, hair left, right, hair front back. I'll probably do the ears so that they can move independently because they can be expressive too. So maybe we'll go left ear down. I'll call it roll because it'll be rolling on what we would normally use as a z-axis in our game. That's probably what we'll use the most for controlling the ears. Right ear roll. Might even be desirable to control those with inverse kinematics. Oh well. Let's grab this shape that we set over here as a template. I'll shift drag it up. I'm going to call this right ear tumbler. Let's grab the subspline here. That way we can change the size without having to worry about anything. Select everything and scale it up. And if you want to be on the safe side, you can always go into here, reset X form, reset selected. So let's align this shape to the right ear bone. Let's go bones here. Sure, let's align the orientation as well. I'm going to shift drag it off to the left here. I'm going to call it left ear tumbler. And this one, I'm going to align to the other one. Axis and position. Let's give them an appropriate color. This one will be blue. Actually, we'll pick this one. This one we usually use for that side. And this one I'll use green. See how visible they are. Let's unhide the head and the eyes. Yeah, they should be reasonably easy to grab. Okay, so we'll do an orientation constraint. So this will be constrained to the orientation of this. Let's grab the bone, constraint, orientation, constraint, and let's go shapes. So now if I select this shape and move it around, everything follows. We could create individual tumblers for each one, but I think I'm just going to wire it so that when this one moves partially, this one moves partially. We'll just do the same thing on the other side here. And once we've done that, let us grab both shapes, control click, and we'll go, or not transform to 0, freeze transform. Well, what we could do is we could add an expose node here and figure out from the local rotations what the X, Y, and Z rotation offsets are, and then wire the parameters so that based on the expose node, this rotation will be adjusted. It's kind of hard to explain how to do it without showing how to do it. I don't think it's really necessary. It can complicate things and it can cause bugs sometimes, so I prefer to avoid it. You really are just better off just selecting bone selector, grabbing this, and when you do want to animate these, you can just double click these, make sure your pivot point is set correctly, and then you can do this. See, and that's kind of the trouble with setting this shape here, although you can disconnect the constraint. If I have this on here, it's not creating an influence for these ones. And again, you could wire it so that it's controlling each of these at a certain amount, but it's more complexity than really necessary. These bones are easy enough to grab anyway. If you actually find these to kind of make your animation more difficult rather than easier, you can just hide them, but before you hide them, you can go to this bone here, go to the motion panel, and it might be in position initially, so click on the rotation, and then in the rotation list you'll see this orientation, and you could delete the orientation targets or add orientation targets, but what you want to do is just completely delete this orientation thing from the rotation list. And then I would do that on the other side. Just grab this and delete it. And you can add them back in if you decide you want them back. So these I'll just hide for now. We're probably not going to use them even. So hide selected. Because if you double click on your bone, you can grab the whole chain and you can just do stuff like this, and that's actually really ideal for animating the ears. So you don't really need to set anything up for those. So let's work on those parameters we started for the hair. And again, that might not be necessary either, but I'm going to do it anyway. With the hair and the head frozen, I'm just going to go all, and then I'll just click on this, right click, wire parameters, modified, attribute holder, up down, hair 1, and I'm going to rotate around, I think X, controller and hair, so we're going to go in this direction, connect. Nope, that's not the right axis. So unconnect that to the Z axis. Maybe we'll go times 0.1. We don't want it to go too much. Okay, then it's back to 0. We'll do the same thing for this one, except we'll give it a 0.2 value instead, because we want it to rotate a little faster. Custom up down for here too. Transform rotation times 0.2. Now we'll test it out. 0.2 might be a bit much. We try 1.5. That's better. While we're in here, we may as well grab this left-right here, and the Y on this side, I believe those are the correct ones to connect. This will be times 0.15. We'll grab this and update this side, grab this one and update it. There we go. And we want to connect these ones. Times 0.1. Update now. Grab this controller again and test it out. Looks good. But this isn't a left-right direction. This is this is like a front-back, and this one's more like a left-right. I guess they're all technically up-down, so we can probably even get rid of the up-down and just use left-right and front-back. So I'm just going to pause it and fix this so that it works like that instead, and I'll show you what I did after. Okay, so I already wired up the other side. I started wiring this side. I got the first hair here, and then I refreshed it here. And instead of up-down or front-back, we're going to go left-right this time, which will be for the Z-axis, and we're going to go in that direction, times 0.15. And it's the exact same thing on both sides. So this is the first hair, so I'm going to go 0.1. Connect and grab this controller and just adjust the left, right, and see if it worked. Yep, it swings left and right based on the momentum of the character. I want the next one, refresh it in here, so we got left hair 2, click Z, and we're going to go times 0.15 and connect. Grab the controller again, and left, right, and see if it worked. And yep, the end of it's curling too now. So the next one we'll do is this one. Just click this update thing and go into the 0 Euler XYZ, and we're doing left, right. So we'll grab the C here, times 0.1, and see what we got so far for left, right. Good. I'll grab this one, update Z, that direction, times 0.15, because that one curls a little bit more. See, we got this hair here. Let's update this one. We go back to this one, update it, grab the Y here and grab the front back. And this is the top one, so that'll be 0, 1, and 0. Now let's make sure the front back work. Good. And we might need to adjust these a bit too, so that it's not going to be able to go through the head as much. Like certain ones might be affected more than others, sort of thing. So you might need to make these a little smaller, like 0.08 or something. Just tweak them as you go. Update this one in here, going right, 0.15, and again, test it. Okay, that one didn't work. Oh, disconnect that. I think we need to do this. There we go. Now I got both of them, and we'll just continue doing the exact same thing for this one. Before we do that though, I'll just leave that to you. Let's do this one here too. Update front back. Which would that be? It would be Y, right? And I'm going to make this one actually smaller, like 0.08, because I don't want it to move too much. Okay, that was front back, I believe, and I got it going left and right, which is not correct. Okay, so I got to disconnect here and connect here instead. maybe a little less. Okay, that works. Now I'll grab this left right on this side and the Y on this side and type 0.05, maybe even less for that. Yeah, looks good. Now that I've finished setting up the wire parameters for the bones for the hair, I unhid all the objects, and what I'm going to do is select all of the geometry objects, and I want to go uncheck frozen in gray because I want these all to be frozen. And I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start cleaning things up here. I'm going to go to manage layers, and I'm going to add selected objects. Actually, I'm going to create a new layer containing selected objects, and I'm going to rename this geometry so that I know that that's the geometry of the character. And that way, if I don't want to select those, I can click on frozen. I need to hide them. I can just do this. So I'm going to leave these frozen so that I don't accidentally select them. And that's for animation purposes. This I'm going to hide completely. So I think what I'm going to do, just to make it easier to clean everything up, is I'm going to put all the shapes into a shape layer and all the bones into a bone layer. So I'm going to go bones, select everything, create a new layer, bones, and if I want to hide the bones, I can just do this. And then I can control the character just with these shapes. Except for when I do the ears, I'm going to have to show those. Unless I added individual ear controllers. I could even add a controller for each separate link in the ears if I wanted to do it that way. Some of the nubs we can actually get rid of because we're not going to need them. They were mostly just for setting things up and for IK support. When we go to export the bones to the game, a lot of the nubs will be unselected because they won't need to be exported. We can do the same for helpers. I'm not going to hide those, I don't need to see those. Then we'll go to shapes, grab all of them, create a new layer with those, and I'll say controllers. You could also call them shapes, because you know that the shapes are controllers. We could even go into the bone layer and just hide specific bones and leave certain ones visible. So we could have two layers. We could have a visible bones layer and an invisible bones layer. I'm actually going to go through the character and start deleting any of the nubs that I know I'm not going to need for anything right now. Won't need that one or that one. These ones we'll need for controlling the eyes because of the IK goals. Don't need the hair nubs. Don't think we need any of them. Or the ear nubs. Or the fingertip nubs. We'll keep this nub because that's actually driving part of it. You may even want to rename that so that it doesn't get pruned from your converter if your converter removes nubs. It probably doesn't, so you don't have to worry about it. See, you probably don't need these nubs. Unless you wanted to create a target back here and use the HI solver and just align the target with the shape that you're using to move these up and down. I actually prefer to just be able to select the bones, just go to wireframe and select the bones and rotate them so that I know the exact angle relative to the angle of the leg. In this case though, because I have IK, that wouldn't really work, so you're probably actually just as well off to have positioned shapes and have these aim at those. And so if you wanted symmetrical animation, just make sure that the vertical position of the shapes matches up in the corresponding frames of animation from left foot to right foot. So this one and this one, I'm just going to delete them. I don't think I need these. Don't need these. And these ones I need just for control purposes. I'm not going to export them though. Just these inner bones I'll export. The shapes don't get exported either. Another thing I could do is just go into the select by name. Just make sure that only bones exist in this list. And look for nubs. Just type in nub. So we got the eyebrows, the eyes, nub left hand, nub right hand. We're keeping those. Oh no, we don't need those. It's the wrist ones that we need. Yeah, we don't need this nub right here. Or this one. The toe we'll keep. The skull nub we don't need. So select that and hit delete. As far as I can tell, these other nubs we want to keep. And as far as we can tell here, character's ready for animation in the game. And we'll start creating morph targets so that we can create much bigger, crazier, cartoony character expressions. So here, let's bring this in and down a bit. And then it looks like he's looking at something that's situated around here, something that's closer to him. And grab these. It's a shoulder control. Bring the arms down. This will be mostly for adjusting the walk a bit. Forward bend could be better, but we can adjust the other parts too, sort of compensate. Okay, we should be able to get him to walk pretty good. Let's see about jumping. And if we wanted to, we could temporarily have this follow this character's center of mass. Just temporarily, I would save it first, but I mean, you could link this to this temporarily, so you don't have to adjust this position of this when you have the character jump up and down. But the only thing is, these are not made to follow this. So we could grab these. This controls the orientation of the upper jaw. I think these should actually be linked to the upper jaw. Let's go bones and link these. I'm going to link it to this thing here. Let's go shapes, grab, just go all. I got it frozen anyway. That should work. So now if I grab this controller here and have the mouth go up and down like that, those controllers follow now. Now the fact that I've linked them would mean that I believe I need to do a new freeze transform on these. So if I move this up, play around with the eyebrow a little bit for this one. It's hard to see because of the hair. Let's make him angry. I sound like I'm half asleep, probably because I probably am half asleep. I haven't slept much. Okay, he looks angry now. And go transform to 0. Oh, and that one too. So that works. Make him jump. Okay, so I do have some controllers, although I'm not using them, which I might use or might not. I think I'm just going to hide these. I don't think I'm going to use them. I'm going to test out the fingers, make a fist. There. Now we got a fist. Let's play with the tail a little bit. Rotation. I'm kind of thinking I almost should have used tumblers for these too. Just to show that you can go in any direction. Yeah, I keep forgetting about this. You might want to make so that the white of the eye goes back a little further, because it's looking like a little bloodshot on the edge. You can bow. Okay, so the next thing to do with this character is to create some morph targets, some phonemes for speech and different facial expressions, and you can combine the phonemes with expressions. You can make them, like, you don't have to create a happy version of each phenome or a sad or an angry version. You just have the morph targets combine the facial expression with phonemes so that they can talk while making whatever facial expression you want. They work surprisingly well, so we'll work on that next. But for now, this character is fully rigged for a game. If you don't plan on using morph targets at all or for your cinematics, then this character should be pretty much ready. But if you'd like to see how to do morph targets, stay tuned, because I'm pretty sure that's the next thing we're going to work on. Just make sure to save your project. Thank you for watching.